Okay, so today we're going to look at a different tree. This one is what we're going to focus on today. This is a kind of Japanese maple, and Japanese maples are very commonly used in bonsai. This one is a rather unusual variety. I'd never heard of this one before. This is, so the official name for a Japanese maple is an Acer palmatum. This one, the variety is Mikawa Yatsubusa, and I'd never heard of that one, but it is a kind of dwarfed Japanese Japanese maple that will never get terribly big. Even if I were to plant this in the ground for years, this is not going to become a 20-foot tree. It's a dwarf variety. And what I really liked about it, what I was really impressed by, is just how much it just naturally looks like a nice bonsai without me having to do much work at all. So I bought this tree about a year ago from a nursery. And so I'm trying to use this as another example of why it's worth just going to your local nursery and looking around and seeing what you can find that might be a good potential bonsai material. You don't have to go out into the woods. You don't have to buy it from someone who really knows what they're doing and has expensive stuff. You can find great potential just in your local nursery. I have done a little bit of pruning and wiring just to give it a little bit more of a formal shape here. Try to differentiate the pads. In a previous video, I talked about the pads, and just to give a demonstration of what I'm talking about there. So this would be considered a foliage pad. It looks like a pad of something, a pad of leaves. And then this is another pad up here, and I'm trying to sort of develop a third pad over here. And the overall effect that I'm trying to create here is one of a fairly triangle shape. So a triangle going like this, where this is the crown up here. And that, I think, will look really nice. Now, you'll notice that the trunk here is not terribly thick. It's only about the width of my thumb, and that's okay. Again, bonsai can have all kinds of sizes and thicknesses. What really matters is proportionality, and that's really key. So a bonsai can be quite small, maybe just a few inches tall, but as long as everything is proportional, the trunk to the leaves, then it's okay. In this tree, I think you can see that the trunk looks pretty good in proportionality to these leaf pads as I have them now, and hopefully over the next few years the trunk will thicken a bit more. I already have it potted in a bonsai pot, so it's going to, if it does thicken, it's going to thicken very slowly because I've eliminated a lot of the roots. You can even see that the base of the trunk right here, let me bring that up closer. The base of the trunk has got a fairly nice shape to it. We call that the nabari in Japanese. The nabari is the very base of the trunk. And ideally you want a nabari that is kind of wide and then tapers up. So it might become wide because there are some big thick roots coming out the sides of it. And that's just because a wide nabari helps make the tree look older than it really is. What maybe isn't perfect about it is that the branches, these branches are fairly straight and stiff. That doesn't make them look very old. It makes them look young. And it's got three main branches coming out of the main trunk here, 1, 2, 3, and I'm fine with it. I think it looks nice, and I think if I removed this back branch over here, if I cut this branch out, I think that it would make the whole tree look a lot barer. But typically you wouldn't want to have three main trunks sort of branching out of the main trunk here. You'd want to have, this would be your main through line, the main trunk that goes from the ground up, and then you'd have one large thick branch going off to the side, and then maybe another thick branch over here balancing it out on the other side. And what I've got here is two thick branches branching out from the main trunk And I don't know, maybe someday I'll think about cutting off the back one. But right now, I think it would just wind up making this whole tree look a little off and a little bare. So I think I'm going to stick with it as it is, at least for now. But I did want to demonstrate that example of what you're generally looking for is usually you want a large main trunk and then a single large branch branching off from the main trunk, alternating in different directions, right, left, right, left. But you don't have to follow that rule. You can break the rule if it looks nice. And in this case, I think it looks nice. So the other thing that I wanted to do with this tree today is I wanted to take a look at the roots and see if we need to do any root pruning. It's September right now, and it's a good time of year to be looking at repotting a lot of bonsai. They've had the whole summer to grow and to develop fine roots, and now before winter is a good time to clip some of those back. And the reason why we'd want to do that in this case is because it's possible that over the last year that it's become very root bound in this tiny pot, which again may over time that sort of strangles off the tree, and how you would know is that the leaves would start dying back and not looking so healthy because they're not getting enough nutrients from the roots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out and we're going to take a look at it. Okay, pretty easy. Didn't require me to pull real hard. It just kind of popped right out. So let's take a look at this. As you can see on the bottom here, there are a lot of new roots. It has been very busy over the last year. All of these white pieces here are evidence of new, growing, live, happy roots. And on the bottom here, kind of embedded in the roots, is some mesh that I put into the bottom of my pot, and just about everyone who does bonsai does this. Take some mesh and put it in the bottom so that it covers the holes that are usually in the bottom of your pot. You got 2 holes there for drainage, but you don't want dirt to be, getting washed out of there constantly, and you also don't want bugs coming up through the holes. So to prevent that, we put mesh in it. And mesh, you can get that from a variety of places. You could just buy a big roll of plastic mesh that you would put into, say, screened windows. That's real cheap, and you get a lot of it, and it's very durable. And you can just cut it up into whatever size you need, and you got tons of it, and you'll never run out. Costs, just a few bucks. So you can see that there's not much room here for the roots to keep growing out the bottom. They're busting at the sides here, trying to get out. And so it looks to me like this probably would be a good time to prune back the roots a little bit, give it a little more room for next year when it's growing. So in order to do that, I'm going to start by pulling out this mesh as best I can. And I am struggling with it because the roots are really in there tight. And as I'm doing this, it's ripping out some of the roots all on its own. And so I'm removing those broken roots as I'm going. Notice that I'm being pretty rough with it. I'm not being real delicate with this tree. I'm not using any special tools. I'm just using my hands. I know that I'm ripping a bunch of roots off, and that's okay. The tree will be okay. This is a nice healthy tree. So it has some stamina and it can tolerate a little abuse. Okay, so I pulled out my mesh and I'm going to put the mesh back into the pot. Continue to remove some of the moss. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to kind of pull out the roots. Try to separate some of these real long, big ones. Okay, and then I'm going to get my clippers and I'm going to start clipping these back. Okay, I'm back. So these are the tools that I'm going to use to clip the roots with. This is just it. This is a pair of Fiskars brand clippers that are perfect for what we're going to be doing. I use these to clip fine branches as well as to clip roots. You know, you can buy expensive bonsai tools that are designed to do basically the same thing, cost you a lot more, and really aren't functionally any different or better. So I generally try to buy as cheap a set of tools as I can get away with, and this has always worked well for me. I don't sterilize them in between uses. You'll sometimes read about that you're supposed to sterilize your tools to try to prevent causing infections in the new cuts. You know, I just don't do that. I've never had a major problem with it. It's certainly possible that a plant I've had at some point in the past has died because I didn't sterilize my tools. But I do so much pruning and it doesn't seem to be that big of a problem, a big of a risk. But if you want to be super careful, I suppose you can do that. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to start just pruning away some of these really long roots here so that I can encourage the growth of fine fibrous roots and give this tree a little more space in the pot to grow as well. So all I'm doing is I'm just clipping them back, and there isn't really a precise way to do it. I'm trying to kind of break up the dirt ball with my fingers a little bit. There's not a whole lot that I can open up here. I can feel that the base of the tree is here. There's not a whole lot of extra space here for me to open up the root ball. This is a fairly shallow plant anyway. So I'm not going to go crazy on it. I just want to give it a little haircut, basically.